Hello. Based on my statistics and stats that I've been reading in this YouTube channel, most of the people watching these videos have found me in the last couple of weeks. It's pretty obvious that this channel has grown quite substantially, as a lot of people have discovered Dwarf Fortress with its release on Steam and itch.io on December 6th. And many people have been watching my tutorials and thanking me for helping them learn how to play the game, but at the same time, many people have also expressed their frustrations and difficulties learning the game. This is something I completely understand. Just because I'm pretty good at explaining how the game works now, doesn't mean I was always this way. I found Dwarf Fortress in 2009 for the first time, because a friend of mine recommended it while we were waiting between matches for Counter-Strike, while we were talking on Ventrilo of all places. I gave the game a download, tried to generate a world, and it crashed. And I don't think I downloaded it again for a couple of weeks until that friend asked me if I'd tried it beyond that point when he recommended it. I said no, and he convinced me to try again. So I re-downloaded the video game and generated a world this time, and it worked. And after getting extraordinarily frustrated with the controls to the point where I couldn't actually figure out how to get into game, I Alt F4 and deleted the game again. It wasn't until a couple of weeks, or maybe months at this point later, it might have even been early 2010, where I read an article about the game, and then downloaded the game again, and gave it a try. And this process kind of continued until maybe about 2014, when I discovered a couple of YouTubers who were making videos about the game at the time. And at this point, I decided I would just start learning the game in the background. I had started creating content in other formats and on Twitch and on YouTube at that point, but it wasn't something I figured anybody would be willing to watch me play, so I never bothered streaming it. But I did start slowly poking at the game over the years. And this cycle kind of continued, where I would download the game, install the game, play it for a little bit, get frustrated, read the wiki, try again, and rinse and repeat. This continued for a rather long period of time, up until about 2017, when my chat had started to bother me into trying the game, as I'd been streaming a lot of RimWorld at the time. And I was starting to get a little bit burnt out on RimWorld when it released out of early access, and I was kind of looking for another direction to go with my content and my channel. And I decided, you know what, I know enough Dwarf Fortress at this point to enjoy the process of messing around in it, and I knew how to build beds and get some alcohol brewing, and I knew the basics, so why not sit down and just try and learn the game on stream, which I ended up doing. I'm not this person who's been an expert at the game for a decade. I've been playing it on and off for a very long time, and I think I'm starting to see the same sort of sentiment from many people in the comment section of these videos and in the Steam reviews and in the Steam forums and even on Reddit. People going, well, where do you find the fun in Dwarf Fortress? How does this game entertain you? Where is the entertainment value? This game's boring. I don't understand it. You need to remember that Dwarf Fortress is a game that requires a lot of practice and also a lot of player ingenuity. When people asked me how to learn how to play the game back when in the ASCII versions and version 47 and before that, I used to always describe learning Dwarf Fortress like learning a complicated board game. You sit down with 5 friends and you read the manual. And it takes 4 different sessions and 3 different rounds of reading the manual before you realize, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what learning Dwarf Fortress was like for me. It took a very, very, very long time. Dozens of forts over various versions of the game, some ending in frustration, others in utter confusion, and some just being lost. But let's talk a little bit about how I entertain myself while I play Dwarf Fortress. I try and set out with a little goal with every single fort. I try and build something that I think is interesting to look at, and I try and create a construction that fits my headcanon for that faction. When I start a new fortress, I go into Legends mode. I read a little bit about the faction that I'm going to be playing, read what the king and queens have done, find out a little bit about the history, read a bit about the mountain home if I can find it, and maybe some cool creatures or artifacts in the world. Then I try and look up and see if there's any interesting adversaries in the world. Is there a weird skunk demon that lives in a tiny little fortress somewhere? More about that later. Or is there maybe some great demons or some angels that are located in an interesting location in the world that I might want to go steal some items from? One of my favorite stories, in fact, was actually a skunk demon that one of my audience members found, which was named Bobbet. This skunk demon lived in a weird kind of fortress that got attacked systematically about 1,000 times a year by every single different faction in the world. It was hundreds and dozens of raids per month, and from what we could tell, the only thing that had in common about these raids, aside from that they were all failures and every single one of those soldiers that attacked it died, was that there was a mercenary company that this fortress always hired in its defense. This mercenary company was a group of humans and animal people and a couple of elves and a few goblins. This mercenary company was always hired in defense by this demon, and this demon then proceeded to decimate every single thing that possibly attacked them. We eventually checked that demon's kill count in Legends mode, and it was in the tens of thousands. Dwarf Fortress is a story generator that can build the lore for a world for you, but you're the person who needs to go and look for it. The game won't present that for you. Then, once I get in game, after I've seeked out a few interesting goals, like in a recent fort where I found out that my king was actually a traitor living in a goblin site, and then we went and killed him. Once you've set out with a little bit of a goal, I then found my fortress of 7 dwarves. I try and name the fortress something that I think suits that goal. I try and create an image that is evocative of what I want that fortress to be, and then I try and name a couple of dwarves. Naming dwarves is a very important thing in Dwarf Fortress, and the reason for this is, you know, when you watch a movie, an action film, I'm not a huge fan of it, but let's just say The Hobbit, you don't really care about all of the soldiers in the Great Battle of Smog. You only care about those named characters. There's the body count for the dwarves and the good guys, in air quotes, is extraordinarily high, but you only care about a dozen named people. That's how Dwarf Fortress works for me. I don't care about 98% of my dwarves, I just care about the dozen or so that have names, that have done cool things that I like to follow. I want to follow their relationships, their interests, their needs, their desires, and that is what pushes me to create cool fortresses and places for them to live. It's exciting for me when I start a new fortress in the same world and the wife of my legendary militia captain shows up after that militia captain died, and she has just the same skills that he did, even though I never put her in the military when she was in my fortress. Then she becomes the militia captain of my new fortress and goes out and begins decimating the goblins and elves and humans that destroyed that previous dwarf's life. Dwarf Fortress is a game for a specific kind of person, and if you're not that kind of person, that is completely fine. For years, as long as Dwarf Fortress has existed, Zach and Tarn Adams, the creators of this game, have referred to the people who play it as the beta testers, and the people who read the stories and consume the media created by people who are actively playing it as the players. If that's something that you enjoy, feel free to do so. If playing the game and taking the time to learn the game and finding the fun in Dwarf Fortress is something you would like to do, feel free to do so. I don't think that it's necessarily a positive thing to force yourself to play a video game that you're not enjoying just because the premise is cool. But just remember, for a lot of us who've been playing this game for a long time, the process of learning it was slow and took a very long time and didn't necessarily click until we saw videos from Krug Smash or maybe Das Tactic back in the day. It is a very slow process, learning Dwarf Fortress, and it takes a bit of time to find the fun. But if you can, it's potentially one of the most rewarding experiences you can have in the video game industry right now. But it might also just be frustrating and tedious, and not something you're interested in playing. At which point, I hope that you'll continue watching videos, and maybe try again in a couple of years, because maybe then it will click. Just like it did for me. Thank you very much for watching.